Good afternoon, at least it's afternoon here in Washington, D.C., where I, David Lipsey, am. I'll be your moderator today on our panel entitled The Video Workflow, Secret Insights when Transitioning to Big Video Workflows. This webinar is part of the Henry Stewart Continuing Professional Development Symposia. The webinar will be recorded and available to participants following the webinar. I serve as chairman of the Henry Stewart Conferences worldwide, and I also am privileged to introduce our webinar today, which features an innovation, an opportunity, and a move to a new marketplace. A very exciting one in my perspective on how we put digital assets to work to engage audiences to make business work better. There are technical and operational things we'll be discussing. And joining me to provide these insights today are Rahul Bhargava, who is the founder and CTO of Evolphin Software, Dan Rosenberg, the Video Digital Asset Manager from Time Inc., and his colleague Burhan Hamid, who is the Associate Director for Photo and Video Editorial Tools. We've prepared some very interesting material to go through. As you know, if you've attended webinars before, please use the question area of the control panel on the right to send forth questions, and I'll distribute those to our panelists. It's a great group, and what a fascinating thing to be on our digital roundtable conversation today with Time Inc. discussing video assets. On that note, Rahul, thank you for the opportunity to join you, and over to you.
Thank you, David. This is Rahul Bhargava, founder and CTO of Evolphin. So let's get started. If you look at the content explosion on YouTube, you would see that there are billions of people who are using YouTube. There are over 4 billion videos that are being viewed every single day. There's over 300 hours of video footage that's being uploaded to YouTube video every single minute. And what this is telling us is that the video content explosion has truly arrived, and companies that are producing videos, managing videos, they are hitting a wall with big video workflows. To add fuel to the fire, according to Nielsen research, a large percentage of marketeers are expected to use videos for their strategies in near future. And what that implies is the problem with big videos and managing big video workflows is only going to get worse. So in this webinar, we are going to look at the key insights on how organizations such as Time Inc. are addressing and solving big video workflows. The agenda for the webinar today would be, we'll start with some video use cases. We'll look at scenarios on how big video workflows are being used. Then we are going to look at the key challenges that come up when managing big video workflows. And we will jump into insights, technical insights, business and operational insights on how to address a transition to big video workflows, and then we'll open the floor for questions and answers. So there are two use cases that we are going to focus on. The first use case I would like my colleagues Burhan and Dan to talk about. So please go ahead, Burhan and Dan.
Hi guys, so this is Burhan. I'm from Time Inc. I'm the Associate Director of Photo and Video Engineering, and you know we've had a huge focus on video at Time Inc. For a better part of the last 2 years, and this comes from the recognition that video, as everybody here knows, is a huge opportunity for revenue driver. Time Inc., as you know, is a publishing company and or has been historically a publishing company, and we're now moving towards strategy to deliver content in any form wherever people consume it. And the use case for video for us has been along the lines of taking all these powerful brands that we have and making a showcase for being able to kind of show the power of these brands through video. Time.com does some fantastic stuff with 4K video. Sports Illustrated has some fantastic content. Live shows are part of our strategy. And the use case that you see here is about taking video content from our studios, from the field, from our partners, bringing it in-house, editing it, and then pushing it out, publishing it where it needs to go.
Thank you, Burhan. The other use case that I would like to mention is a security agency in the United States that produces training videos and promotional videos. And similar to timing, they have a variety of camera cards, stock footages that are getting ingested. They have a much smaller team, and even though they are not producing as many videos, the challenges that they are seeing with this small team are just the same. They need the same sort of high performance big video workflows. All right, moving on to the challenges, the key challenges that face us when we transition to big videos. The first one that I'm going to talk about is just the plethora of containers and codecs. So unlike images and vector files and 2D files, videos, they come in variety of containers. There could be a QuickTime file, there could be an MXF file, and inside these containers there can be many different encodings and compression algorithms addressed as codec that are used to encode these videos. These codecs can come in multiple profiles with bit rates, frame rates, audio channels that differ. The key point here is that there isn't much standardization. Each organization that is dealing with videos can have their own in-house codecs and container formats that they like to use. The combinations are too numerous and they vary quite widely, and this requires support for these various formats, and this can be very, very tedious for video workflows. And we see that asset management systems have a hard time with covering this wide spectrum of containers and codecs. And this can be very frustrating for folks who are creating videos, for consumer of video content, especially the larger these videos get. And they often demand too many compute resources. Unlike other digital asset workflows, they require specialized hardware for offloading some of this encoding, and this is often beyond the realm of most asset management systems. The other challenge that we see is there are lots of applications that go into post-producing and managing videos. When you are working with videos, you might have the editing tools, NLE tools, you might have motion graphics tools, 3D animation tools, and this is very different than managing static images in a digital asset management system where you might be dealing with just a handful of tools. So the key challenge here is that these big video workflows with multiple applications, they need to weave a seamless path across these various applications. Another challenge that we see is need for proxy-based workflows. The users who are working with these big videos, they want a fast edit experience, and they need to work with much smaller proxies. So a proxy is a representation of the larger big video, and it could be 1 to 5%. So for instance, a 4K camera card might be 500 gigs, but the proxies that we generate, MP4 proxy, might be only 5 gigabyte, and it's easy to see why video editors might want to work with the proxy asset that is much smaller, takes a lot less compute resources, but once they have finished their editing, they would like a workflow where they can switch to the native video to export the final videos. And often asset management systems, they lack built-in support for this native to proxy switching. Now that we have looked at the challenges, we are going to look at the technology insights, the business insights, and the operational insights that are required to transition to big video workflows. So the first technology insight that we are going to look at is the need to leverage best-in-class products that can integrate with each other seamlessly. When you're working with videos, you would have your NLE or non-linear editing apps like Adobe Premiere, Final Cut Pro. You need an ingest server that can follow the rules that you have for ingesting in your organization and manage the ingest around your processes, as opposed to imposing a ingest model that is foreign to you. You often need hardware transcoders that can offload the encoding of these videos so that your core servers do not get bogged down. And then you need an asset management server. The kind of big video workflows that we are seeing require asset management systems that can unify the various types of assets, whether it's video, big videos, fonts, images, all of that needs to be managed centrally. Then you often need a high-performance SAN that is connected through fiber channel into the edit room, edit workstation, so that the editors can stream these videos at a fast bit rate. And then need for an archive solution that is smart enough to move these massive volumes of files from online storage to other kind of storages. The second insight that I would like to discuss is need for planning the storage. Storage management is even more critical with big videos than with other types of medias. Big video files need the fastest storage that is accessible, and as we all know, faster the storage is, like SSD, the cost goes up, and there is great need to archive these large video files which may be sitting on faster storage to slower tiers. And there needs to be automated ways to transition after the production is done from the finished assets sitting on the faster storage to the slower tiers. If it is done manually, that is often too error prone. You might leave out files, and then when you need to repurpose or recreate videos, you may not locate it in archive, so it's very important to have automation around archiving. And we also see that the HSM product, which stands for Hierarchical Storage Management products, they often have lived in a silo, and people have had to interact with these manually uploading and archiving and restoring, and they don't understand the footage dependencies and project lifecycle too well. You might be working in Premiere, for example, and you have hundreds of footages that you have linked. So your storage management solution should understand the encapsulation of all these footages and be able to move the entire set of videos when you archive a project. Ingesting in place, this is one of the more critical requirements that we see that needs to be looked at. When you are working with videos, you typically do not want your large videos to move around. You want the ingest server to move pointers, move the path, move the metadata to various tiers that need to process the video, and it should do that by leveraging the highest bandwidth connection it can find, which is typically fiber channel connected to SAN volumes. And it should offload the proxy generation to the hardware transcoders, again without moving the files. So this requires technology that can ingest these assets in place without requiring the physical assets to be moved. For the next insight, I would like to invite my colleagues Burhan and Dan to talk about this. So please go ahead.
So this is all about metadata, right? And so in an asset management system, metadata, as everybody knows, is the key to actually being able to discover your assets, because if you don't have metadata attached to them, then nobody's going to be able to search for it. So one of the challenges, the unique challenges that we try to solve here is moving from a file-based workflow to an asset management workflow. We've tried to build a kind of a ramp or a bridge so that when video content is being ingested, if there is a folder structure, each one of those folders names ends up becoming a metadata field or a value for a metadata field. In that way, you're actually getting metadata entered without anybody having to sit at a desk and enter, do data entry essentially. So that's one way that we've been able to kind of get a base set of metadata entered into the asset management system. And as you can see here, it kind of enables a little bit better or better search capabilities in the asset management system.
Yeah, and just to add to that point, searching is absolutely everything when you're working with these massive volume of videos, because otherwise the cost of repurposing and recreating these footages can be prohibitive. So tying all this metadata and the folder naming convention into search is. So next slide, now we shift to business insights, and Burhan and Dan, I would again like you to cover the next couple of slides.
Sure. So yeah, as we talked about a little bit before, the key for Time Inc. was building an investment in video that that kind of says we are going to run with this, and we've invested in technology, we've invested in people, we've invested in infrastructure to be able to really kind of allow the creative people here to be able to produce content effectively and easily, and so that's kind of that's what's been working for us currently.
All right, next one, you want to go for it, Burhan?
I could take this one, Rahul. Thanks.
Dan, thank you.
So when you are working with video editors, producers, the creative type, they all have their own internal processes. Many of them have been working in silos or on their own, or maybe they're freelancers that you're hiring for a temporary amount of time. You don't want to put in place processes that slow them down or make them do extra work, because a lot of those people want to focus on what they're good at, which is being creative, which is churning out the content in a timely fashion. So the idea is to take a lot of these processes and actually remove them from your editors and producers' responsibilities and be able to give them the media they want as quickly as they want, and have other people like ingesters, like archivists, like metadata taggers, all those people can really jump in and take a lot of those responsibilities away from the people that don't really want to deal with them.
And that ties back to this, Burhan, that ties back to the investment in the people, right? So we've made a conscious investment in the resources to be able to handle different portions of the workflow.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, the next insight is to monetize these videos better that are being produced. Obviously, we need to create more engaging videos in a greater volume with all the time pressures of breaking news and events. And the key to doing this is to produce better analytics and reporting around the video content production process. So this requires tools that can oversee the entire set of stakeholders that Burhan and Dan were talking about, whether it's archivists or editors, motion graphic artists, and be able to surface all these analytics and reports in an easy to consume dashboard for all the executives and folks who are managing this process. And this might take the form of key performance indicators that tell you on a given day how many reviews and approvals were needed to get that video to YouTube, how many video jobs were delayed, and who are the people in the staff who are doing well and who are falling behind, not able to cope up with the demands. So if you have all these dashboards that surface this information to you, you can make investment decisions in where the bottlenecks are, whether it's people or process, and that is just so critical to managing these massive volume of video workflows. Moving on to operational insights, so I would again go back to my colleagues here, Burhan and Dan. Please go ahead and cover the next couple of slides.
Sure. From an operational end, it's very important to understand who you are working with at each step along the process, and that's always going to involve interviewing every stakeholder in depth, figuring out how they work now, where their pain points are, how they'd like to work, and how you can best help them. And through that, you can develop standardized processes at each step along the way, whether it's the studio team who is doing the shooting and the ingesting, the ingest or archive team that's going to get their hands on it next to apply metadata and institute your naming and folder conventions and make sure everything is going in correctly. And the next step would be getting it to the editors or the designers and the producers in as timely a manner as possible with as much metadata on the front end as your ingest and archive team is able to apply, and then the approval process and the revision process with your executives. At each point, it's important to keep as consistent and standard a workflow as possible, so it's easy to figure out the pivot points, and if for some reason there's a break, you can go back and troubleshoot it as quickly as possible so as not to slow down the production.
All right, go ahead.
It's also important to have champions on the ground, and that's going to most often be people on the production staff, the people who are most interested or have been dealing with the most pain throughout their processes as they were working before. These are people that have a good understanding of metadata and how what you're trying to do can help them work more quickly and efficiently, both on initial use of content and on repurposing. These are the people that are going to be working most with their colleagues, and often people sitting right next to them, they can turn around and say, hey, you know, why are we doing something this way, or how's the best way I can do this? Those people are crucial to your success, and it's important to identify them in as many places in your environment as possible.
So one example of that, a real-world example from our experience was when we were planning our asset management strategy, we got into the room with the head of post-production, the head of the studios, head of asset management, and kind of came to an agreement on what our standards would be for our codec, for our mezzanine flavor, right, and also for our proxy flavor. So now we've kind of essentially said we're going ProRes 100% for all of our video that's ingested, and that's what our mezzanine format will be, and that's what our post-production teams will work off of when they are connected through fiber and have the connectivity that they need. Otherwise, there's an H.264 proxy that they'll be able to pull out of the system and work with that. So having agreement with all of the stakeholders around that has proved to be huge in kind of standardizing just a video ingest workflow for us.
Okay. Moving on to operational insight number 3. Go ahead, Dan. Burhan.
Sure. Big videos, especially the fact that file size is growing, it seems like every day. It's important to have a high-performance infrastructure that can scale up to your needs, and there has to be some sort of redundancy. If you're working in a mission-critical video news environment, it's very important not to be slowed down or to have any kind of disasters prevent you from getting the content you want to where it needs to go. So it's helpful to have A and B copies of everything, disaster recovery copies off-site, and it's important for your people on the ground to understand that the back end has them supported, and that leaves them feeling secure, that they can do their job, and in the event of speed bumps that you will have their back. It's also important to work in phases when you're implementing the sort of workflow, so you can check the pain points on, say, your first 5 users, your first 10 users, and up to 50 and 100. And in each case, you're going to need to plan for increased bandwidth, whether it's storage, whether it's transcoding, whether it's archive. So it's important to not only have the plan for your first 3 to 6 months, but then going out where you expect to be in 1 year, 5 years, even 10 years down the line.
All right, so that brings us to the close of this presentation that we had created for you, and now we can shift into a Q&A mode. So David, please go ahead.
Sure. We had a very interesting question come in about standards. Always one of the most interesting conundrums in being on the edge of some technologies and being used in some maturing of technologies. And we had two questions come in, one a little more technical, Rahul, perhaps aimed towards you, one towards Burhan. Dan, can you guys comment on how, what kind of standards for everything from codecs to if it's some of the header files that you're expecting each video to have? What's influenced your design and some of your decision and operations? And Rahul, I'll start with you.
So what, you're absolutely right that the lack of standards is a key challenge, and that's something that I talked about. But what we see is within an organization, standardization helps a lot. Burhan talked about how they have standardized on ProRes 422 format for mezzanine format, mezzanine proxies. And by doing that, they ensure that some of the editing applications that might be crashing with specific camera cards or specific formats, that doesn't happen, and you have a more consistent editing experience, a more stable editing experience. Regarding metadata, it's all over the place. There are tools that, as an asset management vendor, that you need to provide to deal with metadata in header files. There might be organizations that are embedding chapter markers in QuickTime with name, titles, and other fields, and being able to ingest that automatically is critical for them. But there might be others where they never input anything or embed anything into the files, and they have metadata arriving in sidecar files and XML files that need to be parsed. And as you, as the audience might realize, the XML formats can have different schemas that further compounds this problem. So being able to apply style sheets to convert from unknown XML schema into a normalized form that can be ingested, that is critical. So the strategy is to have the system being able to deal with multiple varieties of formats that is being thrown at ingest, being able to convert and read metadata in a variety of formats. So there's no one size that fits. The tools need to be smart enough to cope up with anything. Burhan and Dan, would you like to add something more to this?
Sure. From an operational side, working with creatives who are generally pretty in tune with the latest and greatest cameras and formats that are coming out, you're going to find that a lot of your teams will always want to use whatever's on the bleeding edge, whatever looks the prettiest or the fanciest or the artsiest. It really depends. At Time & Cure, we have so many brands. Some things like Time and Swimsuit like to use, the highest quality possible video they can find, where other of our more breaking news type brands are okay using something a little lower bit rate. But it is important to take into account that you're going to be dealing with all kinds of flavors and coming from all different directions, and you do need to be able to handle all of them, and you need to have a plan for all of them. And standardizing on a house codec certainly helps, but you can never count on what you're going to get back from the field, especially if freelancers are involved. Some people have a very high level of control over their freelancers and will tell them exactly what to shoot, depending on the turnaround time. Some people will just turn on a camera and start shooting. And once your production teams understand that there will be a time penalty to pay if you are not shooting in one of the accepted codecs, they'll start to come on board a little more quickly.
I've had an interesting question come in that is a first cousin to this, if not a closer sibling. Are there some tools that you're using to detect and subsequently extract embedded metadata from video files that are coming in? And Dan, I really liked what you were just commenting on as far as the variety of, or the variety, I'll leave it at that, of ingest type files from freelancers and the complexities in the workflow that suggests. But the question are there is some video received that the system can detect and extract embedded metadata?
The technical metadata, yes, right? So we can get video codec, frame rate, bit rate, frame size, bit rate, that kind of technical metadata pulled in. Any kind of video processing and transcoding engine should be able to pull that metadata and then map it to your asset management, metadata fields in your asset management system, and we are doing that today.
Great. And Rahul, you've been working with the complexities of temporal media for many, many years. You're a recognized expert in this field and have one or two pretty insightful colleagues here that work with you. And we had an interesting question come in, and it was in the spirit of, can you speculate on why there are so few standards for embedding metadata in videos? And if we could kind of reshape that a bit to say, what have you seen historically, or maybe more proactively, Rahul, what are you seeing trend line wise? And we'll start with embedding the metadata in videos.
So there are standards like XMB, for example, that will allow you to embed metadata within XMP. You could have IPTC, Dublin core, title, description, fields. Those can be embedded. But what I think has happened is before these standards dawned, and a lot of these standards were initially focused on photos and images from stock image providers. And in the meantime, the folks who produce these cameras and video shooting standards, I think they often predate these XMP standards that have emerged. And so they obviously went on in their own direction and created either sidecar files for metadata. In some cases, there are embedding standards that follow the XMP format, for instance. But because of how things have evolved, that unfortunately led to multiple approaches. And I guess the other thing that is critical to understand is videos often have been very proprietary. So if you just go back a few years, or even now, if you are setting up a broadcast center, you will be looking at players that are very dominant in the space, that have ownership of the hardware stack, the editing stack, and they obviously want to keep you locked in. And so there isn't a good business imperative for them to open up some of these metadata elements and standardize on them. And so this obviously presents a problem when you are bringing in videos from these other systems that need to play nice with a new open approach to producing videos. A lot of the videos that are going online don't need to use those broadcast hardware. And some of the off-the-shelf applications are great, but the videos might be sitting on some of these historical servers that have metadata in foreign formats that need to be understood. And unfortunately, that problem is not going away because there's just too much investment in existing video infrastructure.
Great, thank you for that perspective. It's well developed, and I think one of the meta messages here is the complexities of both opportunity and challenge continue to unfold on parallel tracks, and all too often at the same time. We had a very nice question come in, and let me read this. As was shown today, there are many touch points for a video asset's lifecycle where stakeholders handle an asset, such as at ingest, video, check-in, review, modify, archive, etc. And here's the heart of the question. Besides mining the file path and file name of a file for metadata, at what other touch points at Time Inc. may metadata be added, and by whom?
That's a great question. Realistically, depending on the richness of the content, you could be adding metadata at every point that it touches. For instance, our studio team can quickly, other than the file path, add in who's being interviewed, maybe what they're talking about, but that's if they have time, because they might have another shoot right behind them. The other ingesting team also could add in similar, but they're going to be handling possibly hundreds of videos a day. So the next step after that is, the producers or the editors who are directly, working with the assets. A lot of that can come down to their desire and how much they feel that they will need to use the asset again. If you're using freelancers who are working in a silo, they just want to get working. They're not particularly interested in keying in any kind of metadata or search terms. But if you have someone who's full-time on staff and realizes this is a great piece of content, we're probably going to want to use it again, they can take the extra few minutes and key in some more metadata. And then as the piece evolves and moves through the process, producers could be adding more based on the direction. The archivist could see some more. The executives or approvers who also are changing the direction. So really, metadata can come in at any time. And even again on repurposing, like say we shot something with President Obama, he could be talking about one thing, and then we bring the piece back a year later to use a different part of the interview. Well, now that has got additional metadata because it's been used in a different piece, maybe for an entirely different brand here at Time Inc.
It's such an important point where repurposing content takes on such different meaning as time goes on. We had an interesting question come in. Does Time have a process for tying video content from these MAM-like operations back to an overarching dam? And what was the model for sharing the data between the two systems?
So the answer is there is a strategy for that. We're in the process of implementing a strategy to essentially the idea would be that the dam is where our final content lives, our final masters would live, so that they could be repurposed, right? So it ties back into that repurposing conversation. But yeah, the idea is that you would be able to, as a producer or as somebody responsible for the final piece of video content, deliver it from the MAM to multiple endpoints. One of those could be the dam. The other could be, your online video platform. Third could be a social media place. So that is kind of the longer-term strategy here.
Great, thanks. And I know that will unfold well with the discipline that you've got going on there. Related to that question is an interesting question that I think everybody who's dealing with this vast river of digital content and harnessing it and mining it, and that's that where in the world do I start? And we had a question come in about, did you pick a date certain for cover and just started then, and you're starting to backfill maybe with your Cinderellas or some of your archival assets or your high demand or high profit assets? Or did you backload the entire archive and then also pick a date certain for go-forward workflow stemming from the software?
So it's an interesting question, and I think there's two things, right? There's what we did do and what we should have done, and I think we're learning as we're implementing. I think that in order for what we should have done to get people to adopt the system faster was ingest archival content. Because if you present somebody with an asset management system that has no assets in it, it's not going to be very motivating for them to actually pull stuff in or use it. So what our strategy has evolved into is actually setting up all of our studios to ingest content into the MAM. So this way, there's a steady stream of content going in for brands that may not have even been onboarded yet, so that when they do get onboarded, it's very easy to show them, okay, here's your content. You can find it, pull it into your project, and use it. In retrospect, we probably should have ingested a lot more content for brands prior to getting them onboarded. We did not do that, and so that's a learning area for us.
It's always so interesting to reflect on the lesson learned, and from a go-forward point of view, as we chart the success and maturation, whether it's through the use of the digital asset maturity model or through various other metrics and measurement tools. One of the things that often gets overlooked, and I don't think it's happening there from our other conversations, but I'd like if you could comment on it for our participants. Tell us a few of the tips and tricks that you've learned for sustaining stakeholder engagement and stakeholder involvement. Now, it was clear in your descriptions that you guys paid a lot of attention to onboarding staff into a pretty big change management situation and how to help them get in new tools, new interfaces, new apps, new skills. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, and I know how critical it is for multi-year success to remember who we interviewed originally and make sure they're still finding the functionality they need and gathering their suggestions. So translate that into your experience at Time Inc., if you would, please.
That's a great point, David. We spent so much time in the planning process interviewing the stakeholders, taking as detailed notes as possible, and specking out what we needed based on those notes. And it's so important that as you're in the building process and as you're in the rolling out process to check in with those people, many of whom you hope will become your champions because they will feel a certain sense of pride and ownership in the system. And these are the people that are going to funnel back to you some of the other feedback that maybe the people you didn't work as closely with have, because again, those are your people on the ground. But it is important to check in with each team at fairly regular intervals to see how they're doing, what they don't like, if they're still trying to work outside the system, why, what are the blockers that keep coming up, are they getting frustrated because they're getting slowed down, is it because they can't find anything, is it because working in this new environment is just not what they're used to and they've been happy in their own little silo for the last however many months or years. So there's a lot of pieces to the adoption, and it is important to keep everybody as involved as possible so they do feel a sense of ownership in what they're doing.
Yeah, it's so important, and it's such a high predictor of long-term success in DAM as I've tracked this over the years. Kind of related to this, is there a certain style of report or analytics that you're beginning to develop for both managing peer-to-peer and managing up, for demonstrating the efficacy of the system, its emerging values for the company, any reporting issues that you're reporting usage you'd like to comment on?
Well, if you have one of the good PowerPoints of a good asset management system is the ability to track what's being used by who, when, and how often. In an open file system, you're not really going to get any of that, and that also poses issues for project archival and deletion of high-res media off the storage. So it's very important to have, an asset manager or 2 or 3 or 4 tracking who's using what in the system and how frequently, and then possibly generating reports off of that and demonstrating to the higher-ups, this is what we're able to do with this system that we were not able to do before, in that we can find everything we need, we can see who's using it, we can see who's using it in what project across multiple brands, and that's one of the big things that your executives will look for is a return on their investment and a return of how your content producers are working better and how this has made a more efficient workflow.
So, and one other thing that like a media asset management system, specifically a MAM, can be really powerful with is we have it set up so that our premier projects are being checked into the system. And attached to each one of those projects is a status of whether it's in post-production or it's final. And that's kind of like a dashboard that can serve as a dashboard for looking at all of your premier projects and what status they're in for a producer, right? They can kind of just at a quick glance just look at every single thing in the pipeline and say, this is where we're at and this is where we're going.
Very nice to hear how those things are tied in. And as MAM and DAM continue to mature and find themselves more than just tethered, but integrated with some of the project management and other cost accounting tools, the insights will deepen, and the knowledge about ROI and about productivity will continue to grow. There's some interesting conversation going on, just starting to emerge about digital lean, and of taking that Six Sigma concept of lean and tying the word digital into it, and the example you just gave of from Adobe Premiere to Project to MAM is an example of how digital lean, or something we could call that, is emerging in the M&E world. Rahul, we've had a technical question come in, and for the benefit of the audience around the world, I'm going to go ahead and read it. So get ready, you're going to get to answer it. Regarding publishing the proxy file to different public channels and devices, is it safe to say that if we stick with MP4 H.264 for proxy, we would all be fine, since all devices, browsers, and HTML5 video tag all support that format? Are there use cases for publishing to public consumption that MP4 H.264 would not be the right format?
Yes, so to answer that, for most web and mobile browsing, HTML5 using MP4 H.264 would be fine. But as we see with these big video workflows, you're not just publishing to the web-based channels, you are sending these videos to distribution partners who will dictate their own resolutions, formats, and what sort of encoding do they want. So some might want, other than MP4, some might prefer ProRes encoding. So you can't just get away with only MP4.
Great, thank you. Burhan and Dan, it was very interesting to hear you talk about some of the metadata development, metadata maturation, the opportunities to inject various attribute, or what I call lights-on metadata, as well as the lights-out metadata. What challenges are you facing, or have you faced, with the governance question? Is there a canonical metadata model? Is there a small taxonomy or ontology group that's kind of sitting at the top of the system of record as far as hierarchical metadata is concerned, or is this contributory from an attribute point of view, but there's no particular controlled syntax yet?
What we've done is what we've done here at Time Inc. is try to institute a few pieces of the most high-level metadata, and we require between 6 and 8 fields filled out just to get an asset or group of assets into the system. And the idea is, even if no other piece of metadata is applied at any point throughout the process, we have the bare minimum metadata in addition to the file name to search against. So maybe not everybody can find it right away, but at least your asset managers and your archivists can take a request from production and say, okay, we were able to find that for you. But it is important to encourage, I guess how you would call it, lights-on metadata to be applied throughout the process. And it's very helpful if you have a group of people, whether it's per group, per brand in our case, or freelancing as part of like a logging team, to go through and actually add that rich metadata. And it's important to get people thinking, if I was going to find this asset, what are the terms I would use, and for them to think about that sort of outside the box, whether it's the topic that the person is talking about, whether it's the piece of clothing they're wearing, the type of music they're playing. It could be anything. But we do think it's important to have that core right at the beginning, just in case you don't have the bandwidth to get the rest of those things in. At least your assets will forever be discoverable.
Great, thank you. We had another question come in that is one of the edge areas in the field of asset management, and it's particularly the edges are quite complex in the world of temporal media and video in particular. And that's the question of rights-related or business clearance-related metadata. I'm sure that you provide this video to a lot of sources, and the question that came in asks, can you describe some of the workflows about how you approve, either out to agency or out to publication, the rights clearance step in the workflow?
With video, that can get exceptionally complicated depending on the production process and what you're doing and where you're trying to get it to go. If you're using your own footage and public domain music and audio, it's not that complicated, but if you're post-producing an intricate piece that maybe is using outside music, maybe it's an actual song that you've licensed for a certain number of uses and a certain number of views, it's important to be able to track that both in your MAM and eventually in your DAM, so it's very clear what you're allowed to use in the piece and how often you're allowed to use it. It also might be important, and this can be a project step within the MAM, that once a piece has aired, however many number of times you've licensed that footage or audio for, it might be part of the process to go back through and apply some sort of generic music that you can use forever.
Yeah, this is such an interesting and emerging area that's been not even on the periphery of our eyesight. It's been in that part of the kind of when the ophthalmologist is going click, 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 can you see the bottom line yet? This has been way out in blurry letter land, but it is, as an industry trend, something that's really coming along quickly, and it's coming along large part because of the quality and caliber and exceptional management to assets such as we're talking about today are becoming available. One of the other questions we've had come in involves the difference in using proxies for edits and when they kind of collapse, because most of the time production houses want to see the video at a good enough quality and see this during rough cuts and viewing of client reviews. So can you talk a bit about what you're using when you're doing client reviews and you're working through the video workflow?
When you're doing client reviews, I think it's very important to have the highest resolution available, especially for any kind of the approval process. You're not going to see a lot of the intricacies or get the full picture if you're using proxy. During the actual post-production process, I think it's important to get your user base accustomed to working in proxy, and a lot of that can be driven by what flavor and what bitrate of proxy you choose. If it's too low and it really looks like a proxy, like even on a relatively small monitor, you're going to shut a lot of people off that way, and they'll just refuse to work, and that's going to lead you into a lot of conflicts and trying to fight with people to get them to work a certain way, because you only have a limited amount of storage, and you can't keep every bit of high-res video online, forever. So it's also important to have a solid back-end process in place where you can quickly bring the high-res back when it's time to finish. If you're making people wait several hours just to get the high-res instances of their video, again, you're going to lose them in the process. But I think selecting the actual proxy flavor in conjunction with your stakeholders is key to getting them to work that way, especially editors. If they're looking for the details and they say they can't see it in the proxy, that's a battle you've lost.
Sure.
It also, I think, depends on your business model, right, and what your target audience is. So if you're a broadcast company, right, the quality of the videos that you're going to be working with is going to be very different from if your target audience is 98% on the web. In that case, what the end product is going to be viewed as through your audience is H.264, and that should be fine for what you're doing for editing. Also, like if you are, what we do here, there's nothing, I know this is kind of a throwback kind of thing to say, but we have a screening room here. And when we need to showcase something at the highest possible quality, we get everybody into the screening room, all the stakeholders, and say, let's watch this together.
Are you using the screening room remotely at all? In other words, could somebody in Detroit, if they're seeing some test track or something like that, and they had some cool car video that Timing wants to cover in one of the automotive programmings that you're doing? And by the way, just for the audience, there was a wonderful article in the Wall Street Journal on April 14th about this, about what Dan and Burhan are working on and Timing's presence in the automotive world using video. And I highly recommend that if anybody wants to see why are we doing this and how interestingly disruptive to the marketplace this is about what do content objects mean for structuring content businesses, journalistic businesses in today's world. So quite an interesting article there. Another question that's come in is it's one of those art and science kinds of questions, like many of these. And what were important factors for you in making the business decision to go forward with a MAM system?
Okay, that's a good one. So we went in. I mean, we had a list of requirements, scorecard requirements, and at the top of the list was we're using Adobe Premiere, so the system that we buy must integrate with Premiere. That eliminated a bunch of systems off the top, right, for us. Mm-hmm. And we had already built quite a bit of an infrastructure in terms of the hardware components of storage. We were already using a StoreNext SAN. We had edit bays configured, working off of a file folder system. So really what we were looking for was a layer on top of that to really protect us because we were in a kind of a very vulnerable state where we had a 500 terabyte set of storage where somebody could go in and hit Command Delete and actually erase everything. So it was a terrible place to be in. So those are kind of like the high level decision points. The other ones were the ease of the ability to integrate with other best-in-class systems. So we wanted to be able to have to say and be able to say, all right, we want to use this transcoding platform. We want to use this online video platform. We want to use this scheduling software for our studios that should integrate with our asset management system. So we kind of wanted the media asset management system to be the kind of the center of the universe of video from beginning to end in the workflow. So those were kind of the kinds of things that went into the decision-making process for us.
Great. And Rahul, when you were listening to these requirements, I know you're thinking about this both with a lot of elasticity in the technical requirements and assessing, does it not, does it not. But one of the things that I've so enjoyed as I've gotten to know what Dan and Burhan are working on is a belief in a unified repository and a belief in the approach that we do need to have metadata, and eventually folks will get their rights cross-referencing from as we get rights express metadata more standardized and the number of contracts more minimized. But Rahul, did something strike you here as you were in conversations about the concept of a unified asset repository and the in it?
Absolutely. That's a great question. What we saw immediately was the Adobe workflows with Premiere, for example. There is need to link with other types of assets. So you might want to drag a Photoshop file with multiple layers into Premiere or After Effects and be able to put that into the video. So they were not just dealing with one kind or one class of assets, but rather an integrated solution that had to deal with images and graphics elements, audio files, and all of that needed to come under one umbrella. To have multiple disparate systems, for example, if let's say the logos that marketing approved were sitting in a separate DAM, and if the video MAM did not have access to those, you could publish a video with the wrong kind of logo. So it was clear from get-go that a unified approach would work very well.
And on that note, speaking of unified repositories, the big hand and the little hand have unified. This brings our hour together to a close, and I'd like to thank our colleagues from Time Inc., our sponsor, and the great insights we've gotten from Evolphin. This webinar is brought to you on behalf of Henry Stewart and the Continuing Professional Development Series. We look forward, hopefully, to seeing many of you at the Henry Stewart Conference in New York City next week. And stay tuned for more insights and more interesting discussions in our future webinars. Thank you all. Good afternoon from Washington, D.C.